Hi, I'm the guy who likes creating content and coding. The guy who made the user roulette bot for Discord. For more details, you can watch my last video after this one. On release day, my bot didn't even work correctly because my day 1 patch was bad. And it lasted for like 2 weeks until some error popped up and it died. I couldn't even figure out what the problem was because I didn't implement a data collection feature. Now I understand why companies always want your data. But it works now, I hope. Anyway, back to the main subject of today. Delta time is often used in video games. If you're asking yourself, what is delta time? In a nutshell, it's the time difference between rendering 2 frames. In a YouTube video, let's get started. Here we have an application that just slightly changes the background color every frame. It looks like it's cycling through the primary colors. The application defines a cycle when the background changes color from red to yellow to green and eventually back to red. It starts off from black as initialization. Here you can see what the target FPS is and what the Pygame is managing to do. Below that you can see the amount of color change that happens every frame. And finally we have a timer that measures how long it takes to do a full cycle for us to compare. We are currently testing the effects of different frame rates without delta time. Because we are only allowing 15 FPS, the app can only update 15 times per second. Our changing value is fixed at 1 because we're not using delta time. So the color changes its value by 15 times per second. While I coded this app, I designed it to run at 60 FPS. But because we're now testing at only 1/4 of 60 FPS, it's about 4 times slower than originally intended. If you will play a game with player movement and lag, the player wouldn't travel the same distance as it should, but rather time freezes in game for the player. In this case, the amount of FPS determines how fast time goes inside the game. This means that if we were going for 120 FPS, the in-game time would go twice as fast. Looking back at the app, we can see that the time it takes to cycle through the primary colors is less the more FPS we get. At 60 FPS, it takes about 17 seconds to do a full cycle, which is the intended time. But when looking at 120 FPS, the time almost halves. And that's where delta time comes to save the day. We calculate delta time by measuring the time it takes to render the next frame, starting the measurement from the last rendered frame. But to simplify, I just took the current FPS and divided it by the intended FPS, which is 60. We're getting 15 FPS divided by 60 equaling to 0.25. And because we don't want the time to slow down at lower FPS and the time to speed up at higher FPS, we divide our default changing value 1 by 0.25. We're not 4 times slower anymore at 15 FPS, but about equal to the time it takes to do a cycle at 60 FPS with delta time. No matter how high or low the FPS is, it's still taking about 17 seconds to do a full cycle. Problem solved. I don't know why I'm even talking about this topic. It is just cool how the littlest details have the biggest impacts in our gameplay. If you made it this far into the video, you probably got a little smarter today. Bye. But it works now.